everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and we have our world famous speaker, Professor Rob Enderle. Uh, Professor Rob, today's topic is enhancing job creation in fifth industrial revolution. What you want to discuss on that particular issue?
Sure. Well, the fifth industrial revolution is a level of automation driven by artificial intelligence that creates an unprecedented risk to existing job holders. Over the last 2 years, we've taken artificial intelligence from being kind of an interesting technology with little to attach to it in terms of meaningful progress to a technology that is now matching or exceeding human capability across almost every vector, and that's just in 2 years. Imagine what it's going to be like 2, 3, or 4, or 5 years from now. So there's a real risk of job displacement. We already have AI employees that have been created, programmers in the initial instance, but you've got large segments of certain verticals, fast food, for instance, that are moving very aggressively to full automation and turning restaurants into what is basically a large machine that produces the food without people. The difficulty is, and the problem is the existing workforce has to a large extent not been trained up in STEM skills, and so and that's kind of what you need to play here. And so where we do have significant shortages in data scientists, in coders, in software engineers, and in advanced hardware engineers, a lot of those shortages are now being addressed by artificial intelligence because they can't get the people they need to fill the jobs, and the end result is those jobs are now going away. So the progress for an individual who is doing something that's about to be displaced to becoming an employee in a different industry or doing a different class of job has been almost non-existent. Our retraining efforts are pathetic at best, and the end result is, while there will undoubtedly be positions that people can fill, unlike other ages where those positions forced retraining and forced a process of realignment in terms of skills and capabilities with the new jobs. In this revolution, what we're doing is we're actually taking the technology and applying it directly to that problem. In other words, we're taking AIs and training them to fill the jobs that are unfilled. And that's not a sustainable process if you want people to remain employed and happy. You create large segments of the population that are unemployed and unemployable, you're going to have significant upheaval and real potential for a violent revolution. And and I just finished a call with the AI consortium, which is focused, as you would think, on creating better, faster, cheaper artificial intelligences. But there was no aspect of that AI consortium discussion on retraining the people that are going to be displaced. It's almost as if the problem doesn't exist in the minds of the folks that are driving these AI initiatives, and the end result is we're going to have a significant problem if we don't pivot pretty solidly from this underlying concept of creating new jobs and then training AIs to fill them, because the people that we're displacing, even if they're retrained, may not have someplace to go, and that's going to be a serious issue for individuals. And I'm not suggesting making jobs. Maybe the outcome here is kind of reverse taxation, the concept of a minimum national income, where people are paid to do whatever the heck they want to do, and then they have a minimum quality of life, and maybe we let the AIs do most of the jobs. But again, that's not a popular concept either. And this tendency of just kind of ignoring some of these problems until they become so pronounced, they become unsolvable is a real concern this time. And the speed of movement is unprecedented. As I mentioned, in 2 years, we've gone from AI being kind of an interesting thing to talk about and a major concept in science fiction movies to being something real and actually has started to displace jobs. Tech companies are already starting to lay off large swaths of employees because the jobs are being done by what is now relatively rudimentary artificial intelligences. And as I say, in 2 years, that's going to change dramatically. So the issue, at least as far as I can see it right now, the problem I can see it right now is this tendency to, rather than opening up new jobs and concepts for people, is we're actually taking the AIs and retraining them to fill those jobs. So those jobs aren't going to be open for the individuals that are displaced. And that's going to create a fairly significant problem if we don't wrap our heads around it and address it in some way, shape, or form. That's my opening comment.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Tamanna, thank you for joining today. So how are you and what you want to discuss for today's session?
I'm really well. Thank you so much. I hope both of you two are very well. And yeah, so I mean, what the professor was also stating right now, I completely agree that, I mean, there has been a shift from the fourth industrial revolution to the fifth industrial revolution. And the fifth industrial revolution incorporates such words such as sustainability, human centeredness, and concern for environment. These are some of the major things, along with new technology, which are going to keep evolving. So AI, for example, it's going to keep on evolving. It would not stay the same, which was it as it was 5 years back, or now as in a futuristic term, which we might see. And so accordingly, I mean, AI in the third world, for example, would be, for example, if suppose somebody from a middle class family was supposed to access the relevance of this particular aspect of AI. They wanted a job in artificial intelligence, but because the courses are going to be so costly, it's going to be very difficult for them to access this particular area. So, and that is why the governments will have to see through their own planning, because India being a socialistic natured country, in our preamble we have socialism as one of the major sources. So the minute we have socialism, we have people centric governments. So the government will have to reduce the price of such courses so that people can gain access to and jobs which are based on AI, because this is going to be used in every areas now, be it environment, be it pharmaceuticals, be it space, be it be it households, anywhere, robots would be used. And from 10 years from now, or because India is looking at develop as a developed itself as a developed world by 2047. So I mean, till that time, if we are able to empower our people with new tools, would new jobs come into being. So I mean, they have to be focused on scientific improvements coming in the country, as well as a uh, shared notion of compatibility between people and the government, and people across the continents, for example. And mostly what we will need is that people from um, developing countries cooperate amongst ourselves, so that the global south is able to establish a system where there is an interaction between countries, and we could develop each other. During COVID, for example, India helped a lot of nations gain access to our pharmaceutical drugs, and we did it out of aid. So and that, if that capacity, for example, is developed in Africa, so I mean, there would be, I mean, so many of them approach me, for example, for help, as a mentor. So I mean, they're so happy to understand, environment is equally important for all of us. It's not something which is required by one country. It's an important thing. We have to understand that the world is one family. So the minute we think about the world in that particular fashion, what we'll do is naturally we'll come together. So exploiting, the previous centuries were centuries of exploitation of the developing world, by the developed world. Now that's not going to be seen anymore, because there are nations which are coming up in the global south. So and so the job creation amongst these countries itself, for example, exchange of technical staff between, for example, India and Bangladesh, or India Pakistan, or India or African countries, for example Nigeria, so those kind of things would be very interesting to see. And fifth revolution would lead to a better revolutionary statements in terms of the sixth and the seventh revolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rob. I have a very specific questions
Sure.
on how can government add a policy to encourage job creation in the context in fifth industrial revolution?
Well, first, I think governments need to sit back and kind of decide long term, and I mean strategically. Governments often act tactically, so they see a problem and then they tactically respond, which means they deal with the symptoms of the problem, but not the problem itself. And here the problem is, the real problem is what's the role of a human in a world where AIs and robots are more capable? I mean, what should people be doing? Once you create that kind of environment, and we do, and the argument is, I mean, right now, northern countries, which is where most of the AI development is going on, and traditionally southern countries and parts of Asia provided low cost and cheap labor to the northern countries. But if those jobs go away, and those jobs are remote call centers and the rest of it, what then do you do with those unemployed people? So I think the very first step is for government to come up with, well, what is the role of people in a post-AI, post the fifth industrial revolution? Where should people play? And that's not an easy question to answer. Because if AIs can exceed human performance significantly in all tasks, I mean, we even right now, even in its initial phases, we've got people dating AIs, and they're professing that it's better than dating people. It's really hard to wrap your head around. But we're at the beginning here. We're not even at the end. We're not looking at this technology as it will be when it's evolved. This technology is in its infancy, and right now it's performant. So in a world where AIs for almost any task, including government, could outperform people, what is the role of people? I mean, what legitimately, what do you want to do with your population? And that's the question that needs to be addressed. Now you could say, okay, well, we can restrict the deployment of AI, or we could put penalties on using robots. Yeah, it's not really going to work, because every company and every country is in competition with every other company in their segment and every other country in their region. And so the countries and companies that don't move aggressively on this technology are going to be victimized by the countries and companies that do. We're already looking on forecasts in terms of companies that are aggressively implementing artificial intelligence versus those that don't. And the Wharton research indicates you're getting almost 100% productivity gain by the companies that are implementing, which means the companies that aren't going to be performing. They're not going to be competitive. They're just going to go out of business. Again, employees unemployed. However you get there. So the first step is to, from a strategic standpoint, how do we care for our citizens? What is the role we want citizens to play in this new world, and come to some type of agreement as to what that end game is, and then put in place policies to help get there. As I said, it may be that people just become lifelong students or lifelong artists or just they're able to do whatever the heck they want, and the government takes care of them. I'm not sure that's good for advancing the race, though. I have a feeling that and that's been the concern of folks that have written about this in the past, is the race then stagnates and eventually we become extinct. which wouldn't be a great outcome either. So how do you keep people performant? Now, there are indications. Musk thinks that the way we keep people performant is we start blending people and technology. We start building technology into people so that the people can compete with the AIs that are being created. In other words, artificially enhance the population. Well, the issue with that is, and it's a viable path from an engineering and technical standpoint, but is it a viable path from the standpoint of what people will accept? That's a much more difficult problem to solve, because you could certainly see religious groups at the very least stand up against that. And then the concerns about once you embed technology, maybe have people that believe that vaccines are part of a mind control experiment by the government. What do you think they're going to react to if we start saying, hey, you've got to install hardware into your brain so that you can compete with AIs? I just don't see that going anywhere anytime soon. But long term, it might be the solution. But the first step is to really sit down and decide, what's the end game you want? What's the goal you want here? And clearly it's very possible the goal should be, we want people happy. We want them productive. We want them to feel like they're doing something and applying themselves so that in a way that the race advances, it doesn't stagnate and dies out. But that would be incredibly strategic for governments that today are incredibly tactical. And so getting to where we want to go first requires we decide where we want to go, and that decision hasn't been made yet. So the first step is to come up with what should this world look like post AI, and then you can build a plan to get there. But we don't have anybody really addressing that at the moment, and fixing that underlying problem should now become a priority.
Thank you for your excellent contributions, Dr. Tamanna. My next question: what role can education and skill training play in preparing workforce for job in emerging industry during the fifth industrial revolution?
Yes. I personally, I feel that, education is a big area which can help a lot of people to access new kind of jobs, because these are the problems which are faced a lot by countries like India, Bangladesh, etc., where I don't know so much about Bangladesh, because I feel their literacy level is pretty high. India too has, from 1947 till now, has increased its educational illiteracy level to around 65-70%. But if we look at China, it's 99%. So people are able to gain jobs much easily in different sectors during the fifth revolution. So every subject will have to be developed according to the fifth revolution. For example, in social sciences, if somebody is studying sociology, somebody is doing political science, or somebody is doing philosophy or psychology, any of these subjects, for example, there would be a need to understand it in a new whole spectrum. The fifth revolution would require to have a new vision to how to look at these subjects, and how from behavioralism to post behavioralism we have developed, from how enlightenment to post enlightenment, how from a truth to a post-truth world we are coming into. So all these, for example, sciences are developing themselves. So every subject needs to develop in themselves through the help of people, in residing in these countries, and there should be a total nexus between countries of people who are specifically dealing with a certain discipline, for example, and world over we should be able to connect with people. For example, somebody who's doing law, for example, so should be connected to people in US or UK, or Germany or Japan or Australia or China, for example. There should not be any hindrance to their interaction, and so the level of jobs and the economy is going to rise too. So the salaries are automatically going to increase, and so it's going to affect the poverty levels. So these things are there. And so, for example, the space research, I mean, a new way of looking at space needs to be developed, for example. So, what the best we can do is, we can help each other, across disciplines as well. I mean, take inputs from each other. For example, psychology helping philosophy, or philosophy trying to help the space development in a way. And the space, I mean, that's a major nexus, for example, space and philosophy. So, and so jobs hitherto would be helpful for people to develop a new nation, a new world, whereby people, nobody's unemployed. That's a very sad scene, which is happening in India, for example, right now. And it's a major election topic for opposition parties, which is targeting the current government, that employment is a major problem. So that's what is the saddest part. And so fifth revolution should aim at reducing unemployment and also increasing knowledge hereby. Thank you.
Excellent. Professor Rob, what strategies can be employed to ensure inclusivity and mitigate potential job displacement as a automation and AI becoming more prevalent in the fifth industrial revolution?
Well, if you're talking about strategies, let's take this from two perspectives: a perspective of the employee and the perspective of the company. So first, from the perspective of the employee, what you need is flexibility. Really, we have no idea how this is going to pan out. And you could certainly make a year ago you would have made a guess and said, focus. We're going to need a lot of software to go around this. Focus on coding, get your STEM skills in order, and become a coder. Well, it turns out that's one of the first. That's actually the very first thing that AI is displacing in terms of a virtual employee or coders. And Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, just recently said, "Yeah, don't become a coder. That by the time you get there, that job's going to be gone." And that happened in 2 years. So I remember to get an engineering software engineering degree is probably going to take you 4. So by the time you were halfway through your education, going after that first job, now you're being told that job's not going to exist by the time you graduate, and so you need to go on a different path. That suggests that right now your focus needs to be on flexibility. Folks that have multiple specialties as they come forward are likely going to be in high demand, at least for the foreseeable future. A degree in medicine coupled with a degree in computer science is probably going to be golden as we go through the end of the decade. And also it allows you additional flexibility. But this is a case where you want to build in as much breadth in your education as you possibly can so that you can rapidly shift from opportunity to opportunity. You do not want to be locked in a particular skill set, because chances are whatever that skill set is, by the time you graduate, it's going to be gone. So you need the ability to pivot to something else. And the things that are probably going to be the most sustainable are bridge skills. As I mentioned, medicine and computer science would be a really powerful degree combination right now, because we're just starting to explore those convergence points. Now, from a company perspective, preserving employees isn't necessarily a priority. I mean, it's just I got off a call last night on talking about the U.S.'s FTC ruling that non-competes were illegal, and a lot of the companies here in the United States are going to fight that ruling, even though it's to the benefit of employees. And the use of a non-compete is an economic decision by companies, and it's considered broadly abusive to the employees that they force to sign it. And so that says companies, for the most part, don't necessarily have their employees and maintaining employees' jobs as a priority unless it's legislated. So, for instance, in Germany, it's legislated, and companies are required to preserve the jobs that they are displacing. That may be something that can happen, but remember, the fact that it had to be required by government suggests that companies aren't going to do this themselves. And so to suggest that most companies, I mean, certainly some do. I look at the Microsoft counterpoint on the FTC judgment, where they said, Our focus is on keeping employees productive, keeping them happy. We don't believe in non-competes, except for executives, which I've got a different argument for that. But at least they're taking a position that employees are important, and they're one of the developers for AI. But are they doing anything to assure the jobs of their employees as they go forward? Well, if they are, I can't find it. So once again, companies don't appear to have that priority, and so putting forth a strategy that companies won't use given their current mindset is problematic. If this is what you want, then the German example probably comes forward, and there needs to be regulation in place to assure that the companies do protect the jobs that they're displacing. But remember, there's a downside to that, because those companies will, by nature, become less competitive with their peers that don't have that particular impediment. And if they're competing on a global market, say Mercedes-Benz is competing on a global market with Chinese automakers who do not have this requirement, which is kind of funny because you always thought that China's government was very employee-centric because they were very much afraid of having large portions of the population being unemployed because it can result in revolt. But it doesn't look like the current administration is on that page anymore, which I think is going to be really problematic for China, given the number of people they have and what could happen if large swaths of that population become unemployed. And the fact that they don't displace governments through elections, they displace governments through revolution. So I think the path that China's on is going to be incredibly dangerous. So in the end, I think government does need to step in here and on a global basis, so that countries that don't implement this aren't advantaged. So you sanction companies that are abusing their employees. Countries that are abusing their employees. You sanction companies that are abusing their employees, and go down that particular path to create a level field so that everybody is held to the same standard on a global basis to protect the jobs of the employees and assure that those that are displaced have some place to go. That's good for government. It's probably good for the employees. It also figure you displace, millions of people. How are they going to buy your goods? I mean, the thing is, it's not just you could have revolution. Your entire economy can collapse if you start laying off broad swaths of your employees. Because I'll tell you one thing that AIs don't do: they don't buy stuff. AIs don't need new cars. They don't need new houses. They don't need appliances. You start getting rid of people working, and those people can't afford anything. Who are you producing for? So this outcome isn't good for anybody, unless you're saying it's good for the AIs and we're okay with becoming obsolete and we'll have robots control the world going forward, which I would argue probably isn't good for my health or yours either. So in the end, I think that if you want companies to protect employees, that needs to be an edict, and it needs to be an edict that's as global as possible, with economic penalties for countries and companies that don't protect their employees and citizens. And to be honest, I think governments should just do this naturally, because the outcome for their entire society will be dire if they don't take care of this problem. But again, we go back to governments not thinking strategically, they think tactically, which means they may not wrap their heads around this until it's way too late.
Excellent. Dr. Tamanna, my next questions to you. In what way international collaboration foster job creation and economic growth in the global landscape of the fifth industrial revolutions?
Yes, Dr. Sharif, that international collaboration is good not just for that particular country, but also for all the nations, all more than 190 nations of the world. One good decision taken by one country can help several other countries which are in the race for developing themselves, not just scientifically but also socially, and as industrially, everywhere. So I guess international collaboration is must, and selfish outlook of the Western nations, which have been trying to rule these countries, is deplorable. I mean, it's like it's not going to be taken anymore laid back, and people, all the Western European countries need to take stock of that the global South is not going to take it, and there are regions which are rising up in a big way. So the poorer nations have to come together. If they do not get help from the developed world, then they should come together, and they should forge an alliance, whereby there should be a collaboration of the industry, government, and academia, and also people from different of these nations. I mean, they should stop fighting amongst themselves. For example, Africa, they have so many militias fighting amongst themselves. People are dying. So for example, Middle East, just see the situation in Middle East. It's really, really heart wrenching. So you can't just see people dying of hunger, and so I guess whatever a human, as a human being, if we start thinking, seeing people dying out of starvation, or because of bombardments and weapon use, is just not acceptable. And I mean, it's sad that Western nations are not behaving the way as west a civilized uh, world should be doing so. And I mean, starting from Platonic time, I mean, they have had an history of philosophy of virtue. That's that, but that's, I think, it's become totally unvirtuous, and there's no virtue left in these countries. I mean, so I guess if they do not behave themselves in a proper way, the South should come together to help each other. In, for example, South Asia, we had a SAARC, but it's become redundant. So I guess we should stop fighting amongst ourselves and helping. We as human beings need to help each other. And we should have a system whereby for example, in India, we have a very good space system which has been there for quite some time. So ISRO can help other countries and take their help as such. For example, South Asian countries coming together and stop fighting over borders, and like help people come out of poverty, and like people dying of several diseases, etc., is not very promising for people who are growing up in these countries. They're like, they're leaving these countries and going. So I don't think that's a very great thing. And so what should happen really is that these countries should come together, and Western nations should realize that they also need their help. Alone themselves, they also would not be able to succeed in their goals. And um, exploitation and any kind of uh, you know exploiting people in their own ways is not going to help anybody, and nor would anybody take it anymore. So because of development of technology such as AI, etc., people can come to know what's happening. I mean, across the every country has a satellite system. The drone systems. People are spying into each other. So I guess if the governments realize that, I mean, then the industrial revolution, the fifth industrial revolution, to succeed, it's going to happen only when the world collaborates. A cosmopolitan culture, as Derrida would say, a cosmopolitan culture which is hospitable to each other would help. And we can take care of countries' borders, etc. That's simply something else. But what right now we need to focus on is our people, who are looking for change, who are the youth, for example, people who are in their 30s or 20s. They're looking for change in the system. So till the time that doesn't happen, the fifth industrial revolution is not going to succeed.
Thank you. Professor Rob, what's your closing
Thank you.
remarks and what is your advice for emerging economy? Professor Rob.
Well, generally, we're facing a fairly significant problem that's approaching, and that is the broad elimination of jobs and the lack of job creation in areas where you need the jobs to be created, because AIs can fulfill both roles. Both they can displace existing jobs, and they can be put in place in the new jobs that we're anticipating. That's going to create a fairly significant problem in terms of retaining, training, and placement. So my closing remark is, folks really need to start thinking about what the world should look like post AI, and then working to build that world. If we don't do that, what we're going to end up with is something we're going to regret.
Thank you. Dr. Tamanna, what's your closing remarks and what's your advice for Industry
Um,
5.0 development?
I mean, as Professor Rob was also saying, I mean, that, people have to decide what post fifth revolution is going to be like. And also, I mean, the world, we have to have a more hospitable and a more compatible and a more cosmopolitan culture which needs to be developed, which has been spoken about and written about a lot in the 1990s. That system has to come back to place. People have spoken about all these people. People are different, cultures are different, but there is a scope for multiculturalism to exist in the world. And people, I mean, the fifth revolution, probably many nations would not even be in the third industrial revolution. So we need to pick them up. We have a responsibility. For example, India being a big nation, we still have scope. But there's the nations which are very small, and they do not have much help. So so what the world needs to come in to do is to come together and forge friendships rather than enmity. That's what I want. Thank
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. I request all of our audience, please share our content as much as possible. Thank you, Professor Rao, for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. And thank you, Dr. Tamalda. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.